Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jason Glassby. I am one of your hosts today, along with Justin Kistner. We started a company called Justin started a company called CopyClub last year. And through that, we wrote a lot of articles, spent something like 1,000 hours writing articles using AI in the past year, and have really explored how to get better results from AI and how to think about AI to get consistently better results than what we were initially getting. Obviously, AI continues to evolve, but what we've been learning over the past 4 months, we started Copy Club in January, and we've been doing coached courses, weekly calls, office hours, study halls, really diving into what's possible with AI in a working environment, often tied to writing specifically. And so today we're going to be doing a show and tell, talking about what we've learned towards creativity, how we use specific prompts to get better results, to increase the capacity of our ideas and creativity, and then to move through the layers of effort more seamlessly. Justin has put together awesome slides. He's going to be leading the charge. I am your color commentary host. If you have questions, feel free to reach them out. You can click the hand or whatever. We're here to solve problems, answer questions, and get you guys inspired. But it's a conversation. Don't feel like you have to wait. With that said, if anyone has any specific questions, let us know. Otherwise, Justin, I'll let you take over.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that we have probably more slides than we have time for, depending on how quickly I crush through. But we really want to make sure that you get out of this what you want. So we'd love to hear in the chat if there are specific things that you want to know more about or questions that you have. Totally okay for us to go off script. And if we have the opportunity to focus on some of our slides to make sure we get through some of the things that are most interesting to the group here, then we'd like the opportunity to do that. So let us know what you want to know and if there are questions that you want us to cover as we start to go through the material. All right, I'm going to share my screen. So today we're going to talk about how you use AI for creativity. And really, that is a lot about you continuing to be the creative person and how AI is a tool in that process. So we want to be able to go over things like voice, idea generation, tools, AI characters, also known as agents. We want to talk about how you think like a developmental writer, how to use editors, and we've got some design slides as well to be able to go over for today. So the first thing we want to talk about is voice. And the reason we want to talk about this, which we touched briefly on last time, is AI can't exactly write like you. That's a common thing that people want to know is how do I get AI to sound like me? And the fact is that the way that you sound, in order to get AI to write like you would have to do one of two things. You'd either have to train a model. So when you get something like Chat GPT, the GPT stands for General Pre-trained Transformer. And pre-trained means that they've trained it on other people's data, other people's writings. And so if you say, hey, AI, I want you to write like me, even if AI gives you a response, it sounds like they can't. So there are some tricks you can do to get it to seem like it sounds like you. And another way is that you would use what's called stylistics. So stylistics is the branch of linguistics that is concerned with how you describe writing style. So you can do a little trick where, and one thing I'll say is we are going to send out summary of all these, the recording as well as summary and the slides. So you'll be able to grab anything that you see in here where we have a prompt. So as I tell you, don't feel like you have to frantically capture it. You certainly can, but we will send it out as well. So in this case, we have a simple prompt where you can provide samples of your writing into ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini. Those are the big three large language model AIs. And so then you'd do is you'd provide that writing, and then you're like, okay, the above is a selection of my writing. I want you to analyze these writing pieces to dissect the stylistics. So we've given it some specific information that I want you to use stylistics, and it's trained on what that is. And so then, you tell it your goal is that you want to arrive at a description of your style so you can create clear instructions for AI to be able to write like me. It's very important to think through all of the aspects of what makes my writing distinctive. And I do not want a concise description. The reason you say that is because the baked in instructions for most AI is to give you something very concise. But in this case, what you want is something that, as long as it needs to be comprehensive.
I think it's worth pointing out that, this is the state of AI right now. I I find it difficult to believe that, I mean, most people want AI to write like them, or brands want to be able to define a brand voice. There again, Justin said there are some hacks that you can get around, but one of the things that will most likely occur is that in future versions of LLMs, they will actually pre-train it to be able to do some baseline stylistics quickly and in the background without you having to ask it that. At the moment, we have seen nothing to indicate that they are going that direction for the current model and generation. But by this time next year, I would not be surprised if there was some element of your stylistics being stored and something you can call on. So again, a lot of what we're going to talk about today is definitely relevant to today's generation of AI models. However, some of these things are certainly things that the models care about, no, we care about, and they are working on. But if you can't get away with just saying, write like me, here's 2 articles of mine.
That's right. And I'll also say there are some ways that you can experiment with the tone and style of writing that you get out of AI that is beyond just trying to explicitly say, write like me. You might enjoy the output that you get and feel like it's like your style of writing, but you just took a different path to instruct it there. So, for example, there are well-defined styles like academic writing, business writing, creative writing, technical writing, etc. So sometimes even just being able to choose one of these that have well accepted rules for how you do them, therefore it's easy for an LLM to be able to write in that style, but they can still be, pretty broadly interpretable, right? So if you want to try some other types of techniques, one that is very helpful is often to mention a grade level that you want it to be written in. So if you want something to be written simply, rather than saying like, hey, can you write something simply, or make it concise, that can be helpful. But it's also helpful to be able to say like, write at an 8th grade level, or write at a 12th grade level, or whatever sort of level that you want. And I'm also a believer that sometimes when you do that, what'll happen is it'll take jargon or words that you actually do want to be included, and it'll try to simplify them because you said like 8th grade level. So I like to use this additional use jargon only use jargon when an alternative wording would make it actually harder to understand. Um, Other types of things you can do is you can talk about the tone. So I want it to be relatable, understated, and emphatic, avoiding hyperbole or being energized or overly enthusiastic. I use this a lot in my tone because that's my typical speaking style. Part of the way I figured that out is that I put some of the samples of my writing in and asked it to analyze to give me some of those pointers. And then Jason, this next one's yours, and I thought it was a really brilliant idea when you first shared it with me.
Yeah, one of the ways that I have found to quickly get a style or a set of values into my writing is to put a character to emulate. I think Anthony Bourdain, he's a very well-loved guy. He's very passionate, gives a damn. He's a fun guy to, invoke when you're trying to write a style. He's also really direct and abrasive. And I've done some experiments where if you ask the AI to write like someone, like write this the way Anthony Bourdain would, you often get like it trying to emulate their sound. But you can actually say, write it as if it's something that they would like. Then you can kind of capture the values that they're after, and also avoiding some of the things that be turned off. Like, we know that Anthony Bourdain isn't going to put up with like a bunch of high bullshit jargon. However, he's going to respond very well to very personal, emotional, like direct relational language. And so you can use these characters as like fast, bolt, like track bookmarks to bring in a lot of values and ideas. And also just think about how you invoke them. I've used something, we were trying to get something that was more Hunter S. Thompson for an article a friend was writing. And one of the things I said is, what could we add that would make this more like Hunter S. Thompson? And I was like, like specifically his ability to be in the story, capturing you. Suddenly you're feeling the experience of this journalistic experience. And I was very specific about what I wanted to from the Hunter S. Thompson, like voice and style. So using those as ways to quickly get it to think like you want and to get the right tone and style it's super useful, but you have to imagine that character more, so like start knowing who those people are that embody that the LLM is going to know as well.
It's also important to note that it's not going to know everybody. So you have to choose somebody that is well known enough that they would have appeared in the training data. Okay. This is another great insight that Jason has shared. So I feel like I want to let you explain this concept.
Yeah, I have found that if you ask, even if you give generative AI a bunch of your work, it's not going to necessarily capture the way you would want it to say certain things. And one of the ways I've gotten around that is I will go and I'll know I want to write something. Let's say I'm writing a short article, and I'll take my phone and I'll capture a voice memo of me just talking about that content. And I'm not trying to go linearly through the process of what the article will be like. I'm just capturing all of my mental insights to that topic. So I'll just everything I can think of. And then later I use a tool called Whisper Memos, and we'll put the link into it. It's in the slides. But when I capture that, it automatically transcribes it and sends me an email with the text. Then I'll take that and I'll put it into the LLM and I'll say, help me organize this into an article. And we have some formats later, but help me turn this into an article, but only use my sentences. Don't edit my sentences at all. So it's purely my words that it will then restructure into a more coherent article. It'll collect the information about one topic in one paragraph, even if I said it over, 5 minutes of, just blathering. And what's then easy is then I will ask it to make line editor suggestions in brackets. So only make a suggestion that I can then quickly skim for. Like, oh, there's a suggestion. There's one. Oftentimes I'm like, I don't like that suggestion. I love that one. I don't like that. I like that one. And then I can really quickly accept and delete. But I get to give it the energy I want. It hears my tone. It hears my style. It hears me talking about this thing that I'm excited to write about. And then it just formulates my ideas into that article. And I have had amazing results with this to go from a fresh idea to something I'm pretty close to done editing on in like 5 to 10 minutes. And that is the closest I have found to getting AI to write like you.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's talk about idea generation. So this comes up a lot of, what should I write about? And one of the things we like to remind people when you're leveraging AI is we are not suggesting that you suddenly throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? You're still going to have your own thoughts. You're still going to have ideas that you learned from media. You're going to have some previously captured ideas or partially written things. You might actually start taking a look at some of the top voices in your topic area, some of the influencers, if you will, and you might be studying them for ideas. Those are all excellent sources and ones that you should draw upon and continue to cultivate. So idea generation from an AI perspective is where you are literally asking it to help you generate ideas. And there are multiple ways to go about that. I'm going to skip over this and come back to it if time permits. But this part I want to be able to share, here's 2 different GPTs, which if you're not familiar with these custom GPTs, this is something that you get if you have a Chat GPT Plus account. So you have to have a paid account in order to access these. And what you can do with these is, I'll go ahead and open them. And this is an example of one created by 2 fairly high profile folks on that provide all kinds of writing coaching. And one of the ways they have thought through how do you come up with ideas is that they'll suggest a bunch of different things, like think about a book on that one, think about, taking it from this angle and that angle. And so you can generate a ton of ideas fairly quickly when you use these. I was going to sit there and try to go through the process of using it, but I realized that'll burn a bunch of time. We'll come back to that if there's time. But the big thing to know is that there are a couple of these where you just give it a few inputs and then it will spit out a bunch of ideas for you. Super useful ways to be able to generate a ton of ideas. When you go to use, say, like the endless idea generator, it's going to ask you what your topic is, who your audience is, what the benefit will be to them, and what their incentive is to be able to read it, right? So you want to be able to provide that context. Sometimes this can be something that people get hung up on. So we've created a couple of prompts that you can use to be able to generate things like, how do you define your audience? How do you figure out what their incentive is? Again, we're going to send out this afterwards, so you'll get these prompts. We just want you to be able to see how these things work. So, if I'm a whatever you do for your living, who is selling whatever your product or service is, that whatever it does, here's some details about it. Here's some of my unique selling proposition. So you give it a lot of this context about you, and then you ask it to come up with a description for your ideal customer profile. Now, obviously, there are lots of ways to be able to do this. You can go through like a lot of the traditional methods of researching by interviewing customers, looking at market research data. So I'm not saying that this is the only way to do it. This is just a really handy way to be able to use AI to help you define your audience. The next thing you want to think of is, why is somebody going to even read something that I wrote, right? And that's
Oh,
what
shit.
the incentive and benefits are really for. So you want to be able to explain what you're writing about from a topic level, and then take that ideal customer profile that we just created with that previous prompt, and you drop it in here. And then help me think of at least 20 incentives my audience might have pertaining to this topic. And then for each, list out the benefits. And then what's helpful is that this is giving you a bunch of things to react to, right? You might actually go, actually, now that I see these, there's something that's a 21st idea that just came to my own head, and that's the one I want to use. So you're using this to spark your thinking, help you explore different permutations with less energy and less effort than you were before, but you're still bringing that perspective, that point of view, to know which ones are the right ones for you to focus on, right? That's the part. AI is good enough to come up with the ideas. It's not smart enough to pick it out of the lineup, right? Jason.
Yeah. When Justin and I actually studied college, we studied together in college, and we were in the advertising program. And Whiting Kennedy, who, if you aren't aware, is the largest independent, most badass agency in the world, if you're like agencies. They came and they gave a talk. And one of the things we were chatting with the copywriter about was, how do you know when you have a good idea? How do you trust that, that's a great headline and that you love it and that your client's going to love it? And he was like, well, one of the things is, don't stop writing when you find a headline that you like. He's like, it's so tempting to write 5, 10, 15 headlines. You come across one that you like and you're like, sweet, nailed it, I'm done. And he was like, no, you got to write 100 headlines. And once you've written 100 headlines, you're going to know really in your soul the best 2, maybe the best 3. And you're going to be willing to fight for any of them because they're all pretty good at that point. But if you only write 15, you probably only have one average one, or you certainly don't know that it's a great one. So I've always held that advice, but I'll be honest, like writing 30 to 100 headlines is a lot of work. It is hard. And we just churn through emotional energy on those types of exercises. And then at the end, we're often left with nothing. And we're like, I have 100, but now I can't even edit it. So this is an area where I find LLMs to be just magic, because they are inexhaustible in that level of work of taking on just that emotional energy of producing work. And then we get to shift from creative producer into almost an art or creative director, where our job is to get a river of ideas coming towards us, no matter whether it's we're trying to come up with a headline or a campaign, a strategy, whatever. Our job is to get lots of things flowing and just plant ourselves in the river and start moving up when we find things that we like. I think about a salmon going upstream. It like just knows when to turn right because this creek is where it's supposed to go, and it just follows its instincts. And so that's what I'll do is I'll start asking for, give me 30 examples of this type of headline. And I'll see using different rhetorical conventions. It helps it like make sure it uses lots of different styles. I often have to remind it, don't use colons or parallel sentence structure so that it'll just give me a straight sentence. But I might find one or two that are interesting in that. I copy those and I set them aside in the side document that I'm collecting. And I'll say, all right, give me 30 more, but focus on the fact that the product is blue. Give me 30 more, but focus on the benefits to the consumer. Give me 30 more, but focus on controversial elements of this product. I'm just throwing things out there and I'm starting to collect things that resonate lightly in this side document. After a while, I can take this side document, feed it in and say, what is it about these 10 headlines that I like? What is the consistency? Give me 50 more that go down those same patterns. And I'm just constantly seeing flowing and flowing of ideas. Then I might take one that's really close. I'm like, I like this sentence. How can I make this more nuanced? And then I say like, give me 30 examples where you're only allowed to change 2 words maximum. So it's nuancing through that process. What can I take away? What is controversial about this? And through all of this, I eventually just become kind of saturated with what I'm trying to say. And oftentimes I'll just stop and I'll just type 7 words down and I'm like, that's the opening to this post and it's great. But that whole process, instead of taking hours, might have taken 6 minutes, you know? And so this effort that would have been so exhausting to do well and to really know that I nailed it now is like kind of lazy if I don't, you know? And so that's my process. And just the idea of creating a river that you swim in of your own ideas, finding what feels good and capturing it and then working with it and playing with it like play.
Awesome.
Right. Back to you, Justin. I love that
Yeah.
stuff. It's one of my
Yeah.
favorite things to talk about. I could talk about that alone for hours.
It is. I also want to be clear because it can sound a little overwhelming at first, like, whoa, that's a lot of ideas. But when you're going through the process, you just choose like the amount that is good for you so that you feel like you've really explored.
I'll go ahead and tell this.
Briefly on this one, we have a lot to go through.
Yeah. I coined this as just like so many times I am not, or in the past without AI, I would do these steps, like these 4 steps to writing an article. But with AI, I have like a 9-step process. And a quick example is maybe I haven't defined my ideal customer profile very well. I can get AI to give me a C plus to a B minus ICP in 2 minutes. And now I can feed that into everything else I'm doing. And it's infinitely more scoped, more accurate. And we need to get into this new attitude of take all of the steps, even if you only do them like kind of half-assed and like a simple prompt, get a actual customer profile to put into your thing because it only takes a minute or 2 to capture it. So we need to actually move out of that of like protecting our emotional energy to just putting bare minimum effort into all of the steps, but covering all of our bases.
Awesome. Let's talk about a sample way to be able to do that. So when you are thinking about a first sentence, part of the way we will look at this is go, all right, look, I have an idea. I need an opening sentence that's going to grab the reader's attention and makes them want to read the whole thing. It should answer, why do I want to read this? Remember, if people don't like your first sentence, they're probably not going to read the rest. That's just where we are with the short attention span society that we are in right now. So you want to, as Jason said, be able to provide it some context about who your audience is in order to be able to answer the question of why should I read this? And then, before you suggest ideas, think through what would make this post something that is timely or relevant to them. The nature of this prompt is all about trying to make sure that we're thinking about them and their experience. What does our reader want? Because oftentimes when we're writing, we'll think just about us and what do I want to say? And that's great. But if your goal is to be persuasive, or your goal is to have something that, helps generate awareness, it's not about you. It's about your audience. And so you want to make sure that you're thinking from their perspective, how are you engineering this for success? So once you've given it some of this context, what might they be afraid of that this post might make them feel better about? And this is just to be like illustrative ideas to help them think through 20 different opening sentences. And then one of our favorites that we love to use is once you get some of those that you like, being able to ask for it using 20 different rhetorical conventions. Rhetorical conventions are things like metaphors or, those types of descriptions that we've heard, analogies, these are all rhetorical conventions, but there's tons of them. I think we've documented close to 100. And when you tell it to use different rhetorical conventions, you've given it some more specific language for how to think about different. Otherwise, if you say 20 different, it's a very broadly interpretable way of saying it. But if you tell it to use different rhetorical conventions, you get really interesting diversity because it knows how to look up different rhetorical conventions and then to try those. Okay. We also recommend that you leverage an outline whenever you're writing. There might be people who go, I do this all the time. Most people actually do linear writing unless you are a professional writer for your career. So linear writing is you start at the first sentence and you write it all the way through. Maybe you go back and do a little bit of editing. To up level your quality of writing, and if you're going to use AI, it's actually helpful if you have an outline. And so in order to be able to have an outline, you need to have your topic, you need to have your headline, you need to have the idea of your story arc. This will come later where we talk about copywriting formulas. And then you want to be able to provide it with some sort of fodder. That's the stuff that Jason was talking about before with using whisper memos to be able to record your thoughts or just kind of dumping them if you're typing. And then you also want to know what kind of tone and style do you want to use. That's the thing we were talking about before where you want to experiment. Once you have these things, now you can go to AI and you can say, give me a good draft. And that's literally all you have to do is say concept, here it is, put it in quotes. My idea, put it in quotes. The story arc, put it in quotes. Here's my fodder, here's my thing, give me a first draft. And your prompt doesn't even have to be that sophisticated because you've given it so much of this context.
And the more fodder you give it, the more it can draw from your actual words as well, right? So matching the voice that you want because you've actually given it your voice.
Okay. We talked about Nike, and we've talked about how White and Kennedy, who is the one that coined the term just do it, has turned Nike into a well-known brand for their headlines. And if you're familiar with this, this was the moment that Caitlin Clark broke the women's basketball scoring record. And this headline came out. And I saw lots of different permutations of this post. And sorry for picking on Josh here, but it was basically like, below is a strong headline. It's talking about this exact example. Clearly written by a talented writer who understands the Nike ethos. Can AI match the quality of thinking? Let's find out. Then Josh proceeds to put out a series of terrible prompts as is evidence that AI cannot recreate this type of magic. Let's write a headline for an ad featuring Iowa basketball player Caitlin Clark. She broke the record for the most points ever scored by an NCAA woman in basketball ever. But be clever. Be clever, bro. That is super not specific. You cannot tell AI, be clever. What do you mean by clever? You want me to put like a clown nose? I mean, it's like super not specific. It goes on to talk about all these different versions. So then I had fun and I was like, let's see if AI can come up with this. I'm looking for a list of 30 common sayings because let's be honest, that's what this is. I'm not trying to take away the brilliance of this, right? The brilliance of this was actually the moment that she broke the record and having any kind of a statement about it with a beautiful photo and nice typography was going to look good. Sorry, not trying to take anything away from this human who came up with this. But basically, it's you break it, you buy it. They changed one word. So that's the real prompt, right? Now, that's what takes a smart human to think of. You're not dealing with an expert, creative, senior writer that is going to draw upon their years of experience, and then you just give high-level, vague directions and something magic comes back. You have to act like this person's fresh out of college. And so now you say, I'm looking for 30 common sayings that include the words break, breaking, or broken, where the words do not necessarily have to start the phrase. Why did I say that? Because a few times when I was doing this, it just kept making those the first word. Please provide sayings that are complete sentences and commonly used in everyday language. So here's 30, right? Here is you break it, you buy it, right? Next prompt. Okay, now let's change only one word so that it could pertain to an athlete breaking a record, but the saying is still recognizable. You break the record, you own it, right? The only difference between this and the actual Nike headline was the swap out of the record with the word it. And my point in saying that is this is the mentality that shows that you don't know how to prompt. Prompting is about you being specific. Now, let me be very, very clear. AI would not have come up with this on its own, right? You had to know, hey, you know what? A clever way to do headline writing is to take a common saying and change one word about it. That was the real magic. And then it was come up with enough permutations that you found one that was good. Um, in doing this, I actually discovered another, which was one about, you know, how the ball's in your court. So now is the records in your court with that. I mean, that would have also been a really good one, right? Came up with that through AI. So you can help point it in the right direction. Then you have to have the good taste to pick the best option and then enough experience to know, oh, actually, I'm going to change the record to it because you break it, you own it. It's just cleaner, a little more. You do need the human in the loop. You bring the taste. There's another version of this, right? Which this is your decision to include this. I like this quote, Jason, but I want you to have the chance to speak to it.
I'm a big fan of Rick Rubin. I feel like he's our modern Yoda, giving us the wisdom of art and creativity. And he says, I don't know enough about it yet to talk about it. I'll say that I find it interesting about art is the point of view of the person making it. I don't know that AI has a point of view of its own. I don't know how interesting it would be AI's point of view, but I like people's points of view. What makes an artist a great artist to me is something about their point of view does something to me. And I mean, I love him. I think he's really clever. I think he's really spot on with this. I think that what he's saying is it's our ability to find that sentence and know that that sentence is the right sentence for the ad that is making the connection. And otherwise, it's just a tool. And why don't you go to the next slide, Justin? Like it's funny, you just swap out the word AI with camera. You kind of start to see how silly it is that we're talking about, can AI write something or not? It's like, I don't know, can the camera take a picture or not? Kinda. But like, are we saying the camera knew what was a good photo? No. I think AI is going to be able to follow patterns and understand manipulation and results and probably optimize things in real time. But I don't think that it has a perspective yet. I'm kind of excited if it does. But as of now, it's really just a tool we use.
Yeah. And when the camera came out, you know, a lot of the same discussion that we hear about AI is the same discussion that was going on then. You know, oh, it's cheating. Oh, that's not real art. You know,
It's just taking a photo.
but can you imagine today trying to tell a photographer they're not an artist, not creative? Um, so we don't think that AI can make art. I mean, obviously it can make images, but if the idea is that the art is about a human perspective and point of view that another human can then have a reaction to, that's what we're saying. That's still the realm of humanity. We do know it's extremely effective at being persuasive and helping with advertising creativity, and also with AI in your hands, you can do both. Okay.
You want to take
Uh,
a quick, how's everyone doing?
yeah.
Any questions? Are we moving too fast? Is this the right thing? Is there something that we haven't hit yet? There's still 20 minutes left. So if there's any vibe that you guys are hoping for, now's a good time to throw it in the chat.
Just gonna leave a little space just for a moment.
You guys are doing great. We're keeping it together. All right.
Okay.
Let's go.
All right. As we talked about before, really encourage you to think like a developmental writer because with AI, this process is much more accessible. So, as I was saying before, linear writing is that starting with one sentence and just writing all the way through, trying to get it right in one pass. Whereas developmental writing is much more about let's explore the idea, let's think about the outline, what's the narrative arc that's going to make this have the impact that I want, and then sort of filling in the outline, looking at editing at a overall outline level, etc. Like that's developmental writing. Here are four prompts that I highly recommend as part of your writing, especially if you're trying to make something that's persuasive writing. You know, what might be going on in the life of someone that looks like your ideal customer profile or ideal reader that would make them interested in your topic? So, starting to think about like, yeah, what's going on that suddenly would make them say, I want to know more about blah blah blah. And so then that next building on this prompt is assuming that whatever your company is wrote helpful content about your topic, which of the scenarios about what's going on in their life would be most likely to lead to them potentially becoming a customer of yours? Because there could be reasons they're interested in this topic that we're given that are like, they were just being curious. Well, that's not necessary. That's a tire kicker, not the kind of person you want from a sales and marketing perspective. So then what you want to do is, okay, it's nailed it down to here's some scenarios that are most likely. So for these scenarios, what questions might they have about this topic? Those questions you can think about as the key headlines or sub headlines in your article or your post, or whatever it is that you're writing. Um, if they have this thing going on, and then they have questions that they want to know, like what's going on. But I also like to ask, what would an expert in this topic think is important for this person to know? Because they might not be thinking about asking about it for themselves. And by doing this, this gives me a really good 360 view of how to think about my topic that I want to write about. So we talked before about this idea of a story arc and persuasive. I shared this one yesterday, but this is too good and too relevant to this to not also include this one today. But there are these things called copywriting formulas, and essentially you can think about them as the the story arc. Like this one is called problem, agitation, solution. So the idea is that you present the problem that your prospect feels, which we can learn from those product thinking questions we just did. Then you want to poke at the problem until it feels visceral, which is generally like you starting to say what the negative outcomes are from this problem, right? And then people are like, yes, that's the stuff that I'm struggling with. And then present your solution. There's a variation of that: problem, agitation, discredit other solutions, then present your solution. The 4 Ps. So picture yourself in this end state. The promise is then like how you state you're going to get that person there. The proof is like, now I'm going to share some social proof about how this has happened before. And then the push, like, what's the thing that's going to kind of create urgency and nudge them into taking action now? So I share these to basically say, this is the way that you can think about taking your fodder. And when you say, here's the story arc or here's the copywriting formula, it's like rewrite my stuff using my words, but structure it in this way so that it makes a logical, compelling argument. Um, Copywriting formulas are amazing. Content hooks are the same thing, but just focused on like the first sentence. And then sales formulas are more geared toward like sales conversations. I'm just dropping these links in the slide. I'm not going to go over them all today just because we're short on time. But generally, introducing you to the concept and then giving you the library so that you can go through and use it and experiment.
Just going to call out that we need to probably wrap up the rest of these slides in about 10 minutes. So I think we should probably pick a little bit higher pace for these last few because there's some fun ones at the bottom.
Yeah, true. Good call out. I just have to show this one because I just like all of the images that we've made today have all been made through AI. And this particular one, I just have this like, feels like a 70s sitcom or action show, call in the editors. Okay, I'm gonna stop. The reason we like to talk about this one is because sometimes when we think about an editor, we think about like there's just this one type. There's like editor, but there's multiple types. Jason, why don't you talk us through this one?
Yeah, if you work in like publishing with books, I've had a few opportunities to work in magazines and different things. A lot of times, a developmental editor is the person you go to help clarify your idea. Like, what am I trying to say? How am I going to say it? What is the best way to accomplish this piece? Do I want to use first person, third person? Do I want it to be manipulative or whatever? Developmental editor is that person who's going to help you think through all of the pieces before you even start writing so that your goals are accomplishable and that what you're trying to do and what you're trying to get the reader to do is all like makes sense. Um, that is like you can ask the LLM to act like a developmental editor and help me get my head around this article I'm writing, this book I'm trying to write, whatever it is, this process I'm trying to think through. The developmental editor will be the one that like asks you the random questions and helps you see that you started off in past tense, but now you're in present tense. Line editors, they come in once the first draft is done, and they do a lot of the real lifting of does it start at the right place and does it end at the right place and does it flow logically? Are all the pieces in the right spot? And sometimes that is paired with copy editing, typically just because there's not enough money to have your own line editor and a copy editor in separate rounds. But we have that freedom. We can do a line editor round and then a separate copy editing round. And a copy editor is where you're looking at punctuation, spelling, it's much closer to proofreading. And then you have fact checking, and then you have technical editing, making sure that everything that you've stated is actually correct to the specifications of the process. Um, most people never get more than one editor. You know, you might get someone to edit some of your work. And so we haven't gotten the habits of using these types and asking for people to be those types of editors. When you are going through these, keep these editors in mind. Make sure that you're using them to help you think through things and getting the right help at the right phase. Nothing's worse than it telling you, oh, your structure's all wrong, and you've spent 3 hours and now you're just looking for, is there any typos? So getting the right help at the right time is all about knowing which editor to ask for.
Yeah, so if I can say the point at which you have like your outline, that's kind of when you want to start to get developmental editor input. Help me think through, does this overall story flow together? Especially if you have your outline and a little bit of fodder in there. And then as Jason said, line editor is like after you've done your first draft and they're focused more at like the sentence level. And yeah, so this is where you would use the way you would invoke these is you would tell it in your prompt, you are a developmental editor. Help me refine my idea. Here's my draft that I have now. I want you to function like a line editor. And oftentimes I like this technique that Jason does where he'll say, don't make the changes, put the changes in brackets and share your reasoning so that I can choose to make those changes or not. And I can see what you're doing versus asking it to just like rewrite. So I like, that type of thinking. But it's basically you're just telling it, act like this type of person, and here's what I want you to do. Another good technique is to ask for critiques. This is different than editing. Like editing is this idea that that person's bought in and they're just trying to help you write it the right way. Critiques is like the feedback you'd get when you give this to a friend or, a colleague. So, what would a layperson find confusing? Oftentimes, we forget how much we know and we'll start to write something, but if somebody's unfamiliar with the topic, they might not understand it. What would an expert be critical of? Because if you have something that's getting posted, especially, you're going to hear about it from somebody. So, better to hear it from AI before you hit publish, right? What might spark a backlash? You may decide to publish it anyway, but at least you had the opportunity to get some insight on, maybe I had an unintended message in here and I want to change this because that's not the impact that I'm looking to make. Are there any assumptions or key elements that lack support that would make my point less effective? Like, did I make a claim and then not back it up? So those are the types of critiques that are really useful to ask for and to improve your writing.
I'll say the BME was their bare minimum effort because I tried very hard to always at the like when I'm right before I hit publish, I just throw it in and I say, what are the top two things that you would recommend I change and give me two examples of that? And then I just look at it. And oftentimes it's like, nope, don't like either of those. And it just makes me feel like, great. It was a bare minimum effort. It took 45 seconds. And I just got like one more round of eyes on it before I hit publish. And it just makes me feel like it's a whole extra step, but it takes no time, So just constantly putting in that bare minimum effort to make sure that you're capturing all of the value it can help you with.
All right. So moving to the design phase here. What's probably most important is just that I've provided these links. Like we could spend multiple sessions going over all of this, but I just want to quickly give this context so that you can later write me an email if you haven't already started using Midjourney and say, thanks for showing me the rabbit hole that I've now spent days and days and days going down. So this is the official documentation from Midjourney. Midjourney, if you're not familiar, is an image generating AI. The fascinating technology about how they figured out how to do this is worth a story one day. Um,
That's it.
the general technique is stable diffusion. But anyhow, this kind of gives you a breakdown of how you craft your prompts. You basically are just telling it a description of what you want. There are different aspects to it. So you could provide a reference image. So if there's something that looks like what you want, then tell it what you want to do. And then there's this concept of parameters. Parameters are how you do things like I want to define the aspect ratio. I want this to be 16 by 9, or I want it to be square, things like that. It has a whole list of these parameters. And the other thing I was going to show you is just to explore prompting. So when you describe what you want, and if you're new to this, you want to have good language for how do I describe what I want. And so this gives you some really great examples, like picking a medium that you want it to be done in. If there's specific details that you want it to do within that medium, if you want it to look like it's from a specific time period, maybe you want it to have a specific emotion, color, environment. There's a lot you can do there. That's a fairly simple one. There's two more here that I want you to be able to reference that get into some of the more details about like how you give specific details, knowing that you can refer to different art styles. And so you can ask for images in specific art styles. And, this post just says art styles and then gives three. Obviously, there's way more than three. So then the inspiration is you start going, let me go find a Wikipedia article on all of the different art styles, right? And so now I have all those art styles at my fingertips if you want to be able to generate something like that. If you want to describe multiple subjects, then you want to be able to go into detail there. Um, Type of camera. So if you're looking for a specific look, yes, there are like places you can go look up what does the specific camera type, sort of create, and it can really help give you the mood that you're looking for. I'm going to show this next one because this one does a little bit of that, helping you think about an overall structure for getting what you want out of your Midjourney prompts. This one's fantastic in helping you think through the types of like, do you want something that's the design of something, a drawing of something, the blueprint of something, a UI or UX of something. So kind of helping you think through how you would phrase what your prompt is. There's tons of different specific artists too, right? And this is why all of the living artists are very controversial relationship with AI. There's not room for us to have the ethics conversation here, but you have the ability to invoke specific artist styles. Think about how the lighting needs to be. So these are resources for you to be able to go and think these are the types of descriptions that you would use in generating the different images that you're looking for. One more thing that I've got for you is I've made a GPT. So if you want to be able to get help thinking about how you actually create a prompt, this will help you by giving you questions and then you respond. And when you're done, it will give you a prompt. This had over 10,000 uses. I published this publicly to the directory, so it gets a lot of good use. So it's a good place for you to be able to go to. It doesn't cost extra money. You do have to have a ChatGPT Plus account though. I just also wanted to show like we use a lot of thematic imagery in our work. So for example, this was our series that for cohort 2, and just want you to see the ways that you can start to create some really cool imagery, like find your why, staring at the clouds, find your topics starting to formulate in your head, and now formulation, clouds starting to hover above, and each of these I was able to describe with Midjourney and get back these images and create this series that would have been like nearly impossible before. All right, we have 5 minutes left, and let's open this up to where do we have questions? Where would you like us to go into some more detail, thoughts or reactions?
This is also great. It's like prompts for my prompts, right? So there's just so much to absorb. I have a question like when did your journey with AI start? When did you guys start experimenting with this?
Yeah, for
I
me,
started,
it was February of last year.
yeah, I signed up for a GPT-4 Pro account as soon as they announced that you could, and have tried to use it every day since. I definitely use it every day now. But yeah, about a year ago, like it really became like a part of my day to day, I would say.
Amazing. So the follow-up to my question is then there's all this efficiency. I see the tools and the applications are kind of infinite, but at what point does it become like the rabbit hole, Justin, you mentioned, like where you're like it becomes a time suck. I guess there's that learning curve that there's a time suck maybe until you get the efficiencies down, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say fortunately for Jason and I, we've been independent consultants, and so you get a lot more freedom with how you get to spend your time. It doesn't take very long of using it to start to get to a very interesting, productive state. That said, even with the amount of time that Jason and I have, the whole reason that we started Copy Club was we recognized that we were never going to have enough time to do all of the experimentation. And so the first thing we do is a baseline course so you get up to speed. And then it's about working together as a group, helping share things that we've learned, share assets.
Work.
Here's prompts that you can use. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, we have a Notion document or a compendium. We call it the compendium of knowledge. This just filled with like, if you're trying to do this, if you're trying to do this, if you're trying to do this, and here's some things that we've found. And it's allowed us to not feel like we have to be caught up on everything, but people are all bringing their expertise, and suddenly like Dave Merwin, oh, he's using this one tool and he helped me figure out this one thing, because it is just so infinitely deep and it's fascinating. It's so interesting. But I mean, honestly, part of why we started Comic Club also is because I'm like, I want to play with this all the time. And so I need to figure out a way where I get paid to do that, because I don't know how else I'm going to make it through. Because all I want to do is play with this toy. But then you start finding like it is not one of those immediate things where it's like, oh my gosh, I know exactly how to make 3 of me. But as day to day, like pretty soon you're like, oh man, this was a pain in the butt. I should have used AI for that. And then next time you do, and it was kind of clunky. And then the third time you're like, oh shit, I'm already done. So
Yeah.
I will say that we have one more workshop next Wednesday. I believe it is at 11 a.m. Pacific time. It'll be AI for automation. And so we're going to be talking a lot about how we build these systems to be a consistent, like stackable chain of events. And so you can put inputs in and get results out. And a couple of other cool things that we're doing and which tools we're using to get some big results. And then our next cohort starts in about 2 weeks. And that will be kicking off how to think about AI, really breaking through that aha moment. And then, as Justin said, moving into the membership level where we're helping each other actually implement these things in meaningful ways. And we have a really, really good list of people already so far, some really, really intelligent folks that are going to have some cool shit to share it themselves. So, and we are close to time. Thank you all for coming and all of your energy and hanging out so long. I appreciate. I hope you all can make it on Wednesday. Justin, thank you for your excellent hosting as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
much.
It's been a
This is
pleasure.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Take care.